Hello everyone, this is going to be the backup video for lab number 5. Starting with this lab, we are going to start designing user interfaces. So if you would like to follow along, we have this ODB file. So if you download and open that ODB file, it's a simple database with 3 tables. Going through tools and relationships, I can check the links in between those tables. Basically, we store a bunch of customers and products, and we store the relation buys in between these entities. And whenever some customer buys some product with a defined amount, we store that information in this table. In the customer table, we also have name, surname, password for the customer information and date of birth. And for each customer, we are storing a bunch of, we store the credits column. And for the products, we have the product name, the unique PID, and also the price for a product. So in our database file, we can store tables, we can store queries. Additionally, we can store a bunch of forms. Forms are similar to windows. So this is some window that gives me some functionality to work on the database. And forms are similar things. So there is the wizard option, but we are going to use the create form in design view, which is more flexible. Then we can design each of the elements and give the functionality that we would like. With the wizard option, there are only some predefined functionality. So going to create form in design view, this brings the design view of the new form. So let me make it full screen. On the left side, we have a bunch of tools that we can include in our workspace. So we are going to use some of them. So starting with the label, this one. Labels are used for giving information to the user. So if I click on this label, then my cursor, my mouse pointer changes into add cursor. If I click and drag at any part of my workspace, when I release, it will add my label. So this is one of my labels. I can also, for example, continue adding new labels to my workspace. If I would like to go back to the default cursor, I can choose this select option. Then I can choose my existing labels. If I choose one of them, I can change the size of it, change its place. And whenever I double click on any of these items, so for example, this is the label. If I double click on this label, it brings the properties of this label. For each different items, there are properties. And in properties screen, although there are lots of, I changed something by mistake, but that was the anchor position. So I guess the default one is anchor to page, so I can just check this label as well. It's the paragraph. So that's one of the information about where you anchor, or in relation to which point that you are placing these items, so that if the window size changes, it will change relatively. So it's not some option that we need to play with. So it was to paragraph, I guess, by default. But some of them are important. So the important ones are going to be the name for us. The name is used whenever we want to get the value of these items, or these items are also called controls. So I will be referring them as items in our page. So the name of the item is going to be important if we want to get the value of it. For labels, since they are going to include some static information to the user, we are actually not really interested in getting the value of it. But for the label field says that what should be written inside this label. Let me write hey there here. So if I close this, you will see that in this label, now it's written hey there. So for this label, let me click on it. If I right click, we have the copy, cut options, etc. I can also choose it and hit the delete key on my keyboard to get rid of any of the items. In this case, it was a label. So let me just double click on the label's name again. So some other options that you may want to change is the font, for example. I can make it larger, so I also see the changes. and there are a bunch of options about coloring, etc. But with labels, the label part is the important one. Let's maybe write welcome to our application. Please choose an option. So this is used to give information to the user. To contain all the text, I will make it wider. So let's say this is our welcome page, and in this page I would like to have some buttons to go into other forms. So in here, let me add a new button. So it is called as push button. If I click on it and drag it on my form, it will create this button. If I double click on this button in the edit view, now we are editing, we are still editing, we are not using the form. Again, we have the name, but for buttons as well. We don't get values out of buttons, but what's written in this button is important. So instead of saying push button, let's say go to product page, for example. So if I click on close button, now my buttons text has changed. So now I'm going to save this page using Ctrl S on my keyboard. And for this form, I need to give a name. Let's call it main form. This is going to be the form that welcomes the user. So when we start, we will start from this form. And then for the other forms, we are going to go from this page. So I will save it. And while you try to close it, it will also ask whether you want to save the changes. Let's click on save. So for the forms, this was our main form. If I right click on it, I have two different options. I can open it. Open means we run it, we are going to use it. I also have the edit option. Edit means that I'm going to design it. So if I click on edit, I will go into the design view, the one similar to or the same thing that happens when you create the form first, but this time for the existing form. But if I double click or if I right click and choose open, it will open it for me to use it. So it should not be open already. So for example, if I go to my main window and if I right click and try to edit it, now it will not go into the edit part because it is already open. If I want to go to the edit part, I should close that window and then try to go into the edit mode. So I will close this. Whenever you try to close it, it asks whether you want to save or not. So that's something. So let's for now open it. In the open part, we cannot move the items around, but if you try to click on this button, you can click on this button, the animation happens, but other than that, nothing happens because we did not add any functionality to this button yet. So to add functionality to our buttons, we are going to use basic. So it's some language, but it is going to be similar to some languages perhaps you are familiar with, similar to Java, Python, etc. And we are going to use just a small subset of it. So we don't need to know lots of things about this language, but it's an object-oriented programming language. So to create some basic code, we should go through tools and then macros. So these are called macros because we attach them to the events of our buttons or any of our items. So I would like to actually create a new macro for this database. I will go through tools, macros, and then organize macros, and we are going to use the basic one. So when you go into this part, we have the option to save our macros on the computer that we are working on. So let's say I'm going to create my database, but for the functionality part, for the code, I can store this code on my computer only. But then when you send this database to a friend, or if you uploaded it for the project, then it will not carry the code with itself. To attach the code to the database, so this part is actually important for the projects, I need to attach the code to the database. Therefore, I need to choose this last item, which is the database file that I'm working on now. So this is my current database file. I need to click on it, and then I will choose new. Then this is going to create a new module inside this database. So it can be called anything. Let's leave it as module 1. So if I click on if I click on OK, it will save that module and it will open it. So this is the macro window. And on the left part, what I see is that under lab5 underscore database.odb in the standard class folder, I have module 1. So this is the module 1. Other than that, there are lots of different modules saved on our computers. But the important thing for us to work on the one that's inside the database. Otherwise, let's say for the project, you are going to actually show the project stages on your computers. But as a group, you may need to share this ODB file. And while you are sharing it, it will be better if it is attached, if the code is attached to the database file. So in this part, we have a subroutine. In BASIC, the functions are subroutines if they do not return anything. We again have functions, but with subs, so I know this is some subroutine. This is the sub called main, and it ends here. It is not going to return something to the caller, but we can have a bunch of things happening. So this is some function that doesn't return anything. It can get parameters, but this is the main subroutine. And in this main subroutine, for example, I can write things like this: a equals to 5, b equals to 10, c equals to 5 plus a plus b, for example. Then let's try to print c. So one thing to notice, there is no end character, there is no semicolon, etc. for BASIC. So every new line is going to act like our commands. So some of the predefined functions include the print, for example. And if I want to run this section, if I want to run this subroutine, I can click on this run button while my cursor is inside this sub part. So if I click on run, it will run this code, and while we are printing something, it will be printed as a separate dialog. So this 20 is the thing that I just printed. So this subroutine could be called anything. Let's call it button test, for example. We should not have any empty spaces for the subnames and also for our variable names, etc. For any of our naming conventions, it is better to leave no empty spaces. For some of them it does allow, but it might cause problems, so be careful about that. It is better to leave no empty spaces. So I can run this code directly from my macro page, but this is not good enough. I would like to be able to run it whenever I click on some button in my form. So now I will return back to my main window and I will go into the edits of my main form. And inside this form, I had my button. If I double click on this button's name, it opens up the properties of this button. And we have some general properties and events. Events are things that we can attach macros to. So we are not interested in most of them, but one important one is mouse button pressed. Whenever I press my mouse button while I'm on this button, it will trigger an event. And to attach this event to a macro, I will click on this 3 dots button that's next to mouse button pressed. So again, I'm assigning the mouse button pressed one to a macro. So I will click on macro here to assign some existing macro. Remember, we were using the macros that are inside our database ODB file. Under standard, we had module 1, And in module 1, my sub is calls button underscore test. So I will choose this one. It is going to attach this button test subroutine to the mouse button press event of this button. So I will click on OK and I will close this one. I will hit Ctrl S to save my form. I will close it, save. If I double click on my main form to get into this page, and if I click on go to product page, now it is going to run the attached macro, and this attached macro says it prints the result of my operations. So if you go further in the handout, we actually give you some functions that we wrote to make the life easier, and we are going to copy this part. So this whole page is the things that we give out. So I will copy this part, come back to my macro. So if you closed it, no problem. So to go back to our macro page, we go to tools, macros, and we click on edit macros. But when you go into edit macro parts, be careful. It might by default open the modules that are inside your computer. So to go back to where I was working on, I should choose the one from this Lab5 database, from the database that I'm currently working on. It was the module 1 inside this database, not in the folder of my macros and dialogues. So I'm using this one. I was using this one and I will continue using this one. And coming from here, I will paste these codes as new subroutines and functions. So actually we had some indentation there, but we lost the indentation, but that's no big deal, it will still run. But if you want, you can indent these parts. Maybe when we look at some of them, we can like correct the indentation, but it will run as it is. There is no problem with that. But okay, I guess the one that's on a separate line for this one, for the student, I'm going to actually correct, I will correct it in the handout so that it doesn't cause any problem when you paste it here. And one thing to notice is that in my macro view, these fonts are looking larger. That's something I changed in the settings so that you can see it in an easier way. So I will actually correct this indentation problem. It's not an indentation problem. The line doesn't fit there, but in the new version of the handout, I will correct it, and whenever you paste it, it should not cause any problems. So now, instead of our addition and printing operations, whenever I click on button test, I would like to do something else. And to do that something else, I will use these functions that we just imported. And that operation is going to be opening a different page, opening a different form. So whenever I click on this button, I would like to open a different form. And to do that, let's first create this new form. So going into forms and create form in design view, I will create a separate form. And in this separate form, let me quickly add a new label. And on this label, let's say under general, for the label of this label, let's say product list. So we are going to list the products, but for now on this page, we are just saying, okay, this is our product list. And let me also make the font a little larger so that it looks better in the video. And in here, let me also include some button to go back to the main parts. So on this push button, I will write return to menu. So the functionality is not ready yet, but the forms are ready. I will save this form as P form for project, not project, for product form, P form. So whenever I look at here, I have main form and P form. And from the functionality that we just included, so I will use Ctrl F to find something. So this part opens the given form. So this is some subroutine that we wrote for you, and it is going to open the form that you give as a parameter. And if you look at here, we have some initialization for the connection. And then if that form is not already open, we open that form. It's actually some basic thing, but we are going to use the subroutine. So whenever I click on button test, so perhaps giving better names to these ones will be actually, it will make sense. But for now, okay, actually let's change the name. Let's call it button go to P form. And what this subroutine does is to open F P form. The input or the parameter is going to be a string in double quotations, and it is shown as red in this page. So I'm going to copy this code, and I will also include a go to menu code or subroutine, and this is going to open main form. And while we are doing these operations, it actually makes sense to close the existing one. So this goes to P form from the menu, so it might make sense to close F main form here, and in the other one to go to the menu, this goes to menu from P form. It will make sense to close P form first to go to that page. So I saved here, Ctrl S, and going to our main form in design view. So right click on main form and click on edit. If I double click on this button, under events, if I click on mouse button pressed and click on the macro, I need to attach a new macro, right? Because I changed the name of this thing. It is going to be button underscore go to P form. I will choose this one. Since I included some code from the handouts, these are those functions or subroutines, but the thing that I would like to run is going to be button underscore go to P form. Click on OK, and I will close this part. I will save this form and close it. Okay, save it. And in my P form as well, for this return to menu button, I will double click on this button. Under events, button pressed event, I will add a macro, and that macro is going to be called button go to menu. I will click on OK and OK, close this one and close this one as well, save it. So if I now open main form, in here if I click on go to product page, it will open the product form, P form, and I'm going to have the product list appearing here. But if I want to go back to the menu at some point, I can click on this return to menu button to close and open the forms that are related. So now we know how to navigate in between different forms. And now we would like to actually add some more functionality. So whenever we open main form, let's go into main form in edit mode. Not the main form, sorry. Let's go to P form in edit mode. In here, we would like to list our products, our existing products. To list items, we have the list box here. I'm going to click on list box, and if I drag my mouse around, when I release, this will open up the list box wizard. But we don't want to use the wizard because with the wizard, our options are kind of limited. So I'm going to click on cancel. And if you don't want the wizard to appear whenever you create a list box, etc., you can toggle off the control wizard. So if you just click on this button, if it is no longer highlighted, that means that we are not going to use the wizard anymore. So if I create a new list box, for example, it will not cause the wizard to come up. So I'm going to create this new list box and the wizard does not come up. So I'm going to double click on my new list box. This is going to contain a list of items, and for those list of items I would like to actually get the content from a query. Therefore, the name of this list box is going to be important for us. So under general parts, this is the name of my list box. Let me call it plist for product list. So this is going to be called the product list. I'm going to have the products listed here in this list box. So I set the name as plist. I will close this. One important thing, if I would like to attach some query into any item in my form. So with the main menu, we are not using some SQL code to get results out of a query. But in this part, what we want to do is to run some query and get the results of that query and place those results into some item. In such cases, we need to go through form and then form properties. And in here, under data, content type should be table. And for the content, we should choose some existing table. So this is something required for this form to connect to your database. So we are not going to use this table directly. So it can be any table. So I'm just going to choose the first one called buys. So it doesn't matter. It can be the customer table as well. But what I'm doing here is to give access to this form to reach some data in my database. So if you write the code, but if you cannot get the results into your list box, make sure that under form properties, you set the content to one of the tables. It can be any one of them. So I'm just going to close this one now. Two important parts we did was to give a name to our list box. It's called plist. And the second thing, under form and then form properties, under data, the content type is by default table, but we need to choose some content. It can be any of the tables, it doesn't matter. Then, going back to our macro page, I'm going to create a new subroutine. Or actually, when we would like to fill the content of our list box. So that is the question. Whenever you are creating a new subroutine, the question is when you want to do this task. Actually, we would like to do this task whenever we open pform. And we open pform whenever button go to pform subroutine is called. Actually, we open pform here, and then we would like to fill the content of our plist, our list box. So one important thing in the project is to have some menu, and from that menu we are going to open up new pages, new forms. And while you are opening those pages or those forms, you can set the required data. For example, in here, let me also write some comments. For example, if you use this single quote, it means that this line is going to be a comment. So I can write here close main form and open pform, and then I would like to fill the content, fill the list box called plist. This is what I would like to do. But to do that, I will get the results using some query. And now let's try to write that query. So this is going to be some query, string. And then I have a function called SQL to control. So these names, they're just some names that we came up with, but this is the function, and it requires 3 parameters, and in each of these functions we try to give some examples and try to describe what it does. It sets the raw source of the given control to the given SQL. So control is a list box or some other different items that we are going to use. So I will create some query here and call this function, and that function is going to fill some list box inside my P form. Remember the name of the form, P form. The name of the control or name of the item is going to be P lists, right? This is the name that we gave to our list box. And I need some SQL code. I can write it directly here, but it is going to be kind of long. Therefore, I initialize some variable q1 for my query, and I will pass it here, and I will write the query here. So I can in this part write select in my database. Remember, there are some tables, and for the product table we have PID, PName, and price. I can select PID, for example, here. It is going to be from the product table. But one problem here. This is a string, but in our SQL query originally, in the SQL query we also need the double quotations for the attribute and table names, remember? But in here, since we are including them inside a string, using another double quotation sign ends the string. So this is some string that I have here. To use the escape character to include the double quotation inside the string, I need to use 2 double quotations. So this is going to look a little crowded, but it is not some complicated thing. This is only because we include them inside our string. So the double quotation at the beginning and at the end, they are representing the starting and ending points of our string, and inside the string, for any of the attribute names, for example PID is an attribute name here, I include 2 double quotations, because if I include a single one, that causes the string to end, but 2 double quotations mean that this is some single double quotation, this is 1 double quotation inside the string. So be careful about that. So far, it fills the list box called plist using the query q1. So I can actually run this in this part as well. Instead of opening main form and instead of clicking on that button, if the related forms are not already open. So I'm going to save this form and close it. So it is not open, P form is not open now. I'm going to run this subroutine from my macro page. It will open up my product list. But one important thing, it says that the contents of a combo box or list field could not be determined. Column not found, it says 2. So one important thing is, for the list boxes to function, there should be some second column. So in my query, I actually need some second column. Whatever it is not important. So let me call it PID again. So I project PID twice. So now I will run this again. And now in my list box, I see the IDs of the products listed. One thing is that although I'm projecting multiple attributes, so for example in here I can also write pname for product name, but whenever I run, it only shows the first column. This is a problem if we would like to show the results of multiple columns in our list box. To do that, what we are going to do is to actually append multiple columns together, separated by dash characters. So these mean that in my query, get the PID, append a dash character. So this is the dash character that's inside single quotations. This means that this is a character. It is going to append this part with this one and with this one. And remember, I need some second column. It can be PID. If I run it, now I will see that the first part is the PID and the second part is the product name. I can also include the price. So to do that, I go back to my macro and include this part of text. It may look kind of crowded, but actually it's very simple. For the attribute names, we include two double quotations, and then to combine different values, we append them with a dash character. And you can use different characters to separate them, but we actually included some function to split the data according to the dash character. So in that case, you may want to change this dash character as well if you would like to use some other separator. So now if I run it, I see that my products are listed with the product ID followed by the product name and the price of that product. So now we are running the subroutines from the macro page, but if I just go into the form, if I open the main form, if I click on go to product page, it will do the similar thing. So there is not really a difference in between running the subroutines from this macro page or running them in our forms, given that those forms are open or they are going to be opened as a part of this subroutine. So if that subroutine is not already open, for example, my forms are closed now, and if I comment out these parts, if I try to run it, now it will give me an error. It says that pform is not currently open. For this to function, the pform should be open. So, but if I open the pform as a part of this subroutine, then I can just directly run that subroutine from this part. So one thing that we would like to do is now actually going into the edit of our pform, we would like to choose one product and we would like to update the price of that product. So to get some input from the user directly, a text input, we have the text boxes. So this is a text box. So I'm going to create a new text box here. And actually we would like to inform the user to enter the price here. So I'm going to also create a new label on top of this text box. And I'm going to double click on this label. And for the label, I'm going to write enter new price here. So I'm going to close the properties of the label. So user is going to enter the new price in this text box. And since I'm going to get the result from this text box, I will double click on the text box and I will give a proper name to this text box. Let's call it new price. So make sure that you use the same naming convention, not the convention. So the names should exactly match in order us to use it inside our macro. So I'm going to use this name. Whatever name you enter there, you should use the same name. And I also would like to include some button here. So I will create a new button here. And on this button, I would like to write update, for example. And perhaps we can be more informative with our label as well. Let's double click on the label. And in here, let's write choose one item from the list and then enter new price here, for example, because the user needs to choose one item so that we know which item to update. Now in here we are done actually. Let me save it at the end we are going to attach the functionality to the button. That is going to be one thing that we need to do. But for now, let's go to our macro page, and I'm going to create a new subroutine for my button to update the price. And this is the end of my subroutine. And in this part, I don't need to open pform, because if I'm going to attach this functionality into some item in the pform, I know that the pform will be already open, the list will be already filled, so I can assume that these will be happening. And I'm going to use some functions to get the values from the list box and also from the text box. So let me start with the simpler one. So in the functions that we give, one of them is called get value of. It is going to get the value of the control that you give. So in my subroutine, my form name is going to be called pform, and the control is called new price. Remember, for the text box we gave the name new price. For now, I'm going to just print the value that I get from this function. And to run it, so if I try to run it now, it shows empty because my text box is empty. So I'm going to close my form, and I'm going to double click on pform to open it. And in this part, let me write something, ss. And in here, if I try to run it, now I see that it gets the value from this text box. Instead of printing it, I can get this value into some variable. Let's call it new price. So I can get the new price into this part. For the PID, so let me call it PID here. I want to get the value from the plist. But there is a little difference for this PID. So for now, I'm going to go to the menu and then to the product page so that the list is filled now. So in the lists, I can choose one item at a time. So let me choose bag, for example, now. And in here, in my macro, let me also print out the value of PID. So I fill the PID using this function. So inside my pform, get the value of the plist and print it, show it on screen. If I run it now, you will see that for this selected line, it prints out the whole thing. So whenever I choose some item in my list box, I can get the whole thing. But most of the time, I'm just interested in one of these values. For example, I would like to have some update query now. And in that update query, I'm going to set the price of the item to the new price, where my PID is going to be equal to the PID of this product. So I'm not going to update all the products' prices. I only want to update one specific product's PID. I only want to update one specific product's price. In this case, I need the primary key of this table, right? It is 3. So to do that, we actually have included get value of index function. And what this function does is kind of similar to get value of. But with this one, the difference is that we have a third parameter. So the first two parameters are the same, pform, plist. And the third parameter is the index. So we assume that PID, the thing that we are going to get from plist, has separated by dash characters. And we split the string using this delimiter. And we return the first item, the 0th index. So whenever we run this now, we just get 3. So for example, for the index, if I write 1, it will return the second column item, which is bag. For example, if I write 2, it will return the price, which is 70. But in our case, we would like to get the PID. So I will get rid of the print part. So this is doing get values from items. Now I would like to run my query. Run query. For that we have included a query function. It's actually not so complicated, but it receives the string of this SQL query. It initializes the connection and then runs this SQL code. So we just need to give some SQL query to this function. We can also write this query separately. Q1 is equal to some query, and then we can pass this as a parameter. But in this case, since it is not going to be that long, let's just write it here. We would like to update the product table. We are going to set the attribute called price into some value. So it is going to equal to some value. But for that value, so since we are inside the string now, it is not going to be inside my string. This value will come from some variable. So I now end my string. So this is the start of my string. This is the ending of my string. I would like to append, so the ampersand symbol appends two different strings together. I would like to append the new price to my string. And then I would like to continue with my string. I will append the following string. So I'm starting a new string with the double quotation. My price is going to be equal to this new price. And I have additional conditions. I'm going to say var. I want my PID attribute to be equal to some value. And for that value again, I'm going to finalize the string for now, and I am going to append with the ampersand sign some other value, and this value is actually the PID that I just got from my function. So I would like to attach this variable to my query, and actually we are done here, right? If I were to write this query, so let me show it in some other parts in here. So I'm using this query, right? So let me do this. Normally what I write there is actually update product set price equal to some value. Directly I write the value where PID is equal to some PID, for example. This is my SQL query, and instead of writing the values directly, I would like to include my values as parameters, but these parameters are coming from basic, so I need to attach them to my string. So this is one string, I append my new price to this string, and then this is some other string, and I also append the PID, this value, to this string. So in here actually we are done. This is going to update, and then maybe we would like to display some result to the user. We can print successfully updated, for example, update it to, and then we can append this new price. So it is successfully updated to the new price. It is going to write the value of this new price. And we can update the list again. And remember, to update the list, the thing that we are using is these two lines. So I can just copy these two lines and paste them here. It is going to run the query and then put this content into my plist. So if I Control S here to save it, let me go back to this form. Now whenever I choose some line, for example, for the 5th line, water, I'm going to write some new value, for example, let's write 10, and I'm going to click on update, and it will run my code, hopefully. Okay, the problem is that we did not attach that macro to this button. So let's quickly do that. So I'm going to close that part, open pform in edit, and I will double click on this new button, update. Under events, we have mouse button pressed, and for this one, I would like to attach a macro, and that macro is inside my database, and it's called button update price. I will choose that one, click on OK. Close this one, save it and close it. I double click on main form, and then I go to the product page, and in here my items are listed. Let's choose water. Let's write 10 as the new price. I'm going to click on update. It says successfully updated to 10, and whenever I click on OK, it refreshes my list so that I now see for the water it says 10. For example, let's choose something else for bag. Let's write 90, let's update, successfully updated, and I see the new price. I can increase it again, etc. We can also clear this text box whenever we update, because sometimes we are going to choose some additional items. Maybe it will be better to, whenever I click something, to get their prices as well. But for now, whenever I update something, after I update the list again, let's clear the text box here. And to clear the text box, we actually have a function called set value to. So for any of the controls, we can set the value to some given value. So in here, my form was called pform, and inside that form, I have my, remember for the new price, the text box name was new price. I have my new price text box, and for the value I can just include this empty string. So I'm going to use Ctrl S to save my macro. Going back to this part, let's update bag, for example, to 110. If I click on update, it says successfully updated. I see the price has changed and the value is now empty. So now whenever I choose something else, I can change the price, update it, and then the text box becomes empty. So for now, let's also try to do the following. Whenever I choose one of these rows, let's say I would like to put the existing price into my text box. So to do that, I need some other macro, because this happens whenever I click on update. That's not something that I would like to do whenever I click on update. This is going to be whenever I choose an item in my list box. Let's call it choose plist. So it is going to happen whenever I choose something from my plists. This is going to be and sub here. What I would like to include is actually for my text box. So this is setting the text box's value. For my text box's value, I'm going to get this value out of some existing item, and that item is actually, remember, we were getting the values from some index, right? We were getting PID from the first index, and instead of that, in here, I can get the price from the index number 2. So I get value of index from my plist for the selected item. The second index is going to be the price, and I get that price and write that price. So sorry, I just wrote it into the wrong place. So I wanted to write it here in my choose plist subroutine. I set the value of my text box to the value that I get from my plist. It is for the selected item, and it is going to be not from the index 0, it is going to be from index number 2. So let me save this one, and I need to close pform now, and I go into edit mode of my pform, And this is going to happen whenever I change the thing that I choose in my list box. So I need to double click on this list box, and in here we have a bunch of events. So among these items, actually what we can do is we can say mouse button pressed again, I guess. So for the mouse button pressed event of my list box this time, this is not a button. For the list box mouse button pressed events, I'm going to choose plist. This is the new subroutine I just wrote. So let me click on OK. I'm going to save this part and close it. Let's go into the main form, go to the product page. My products are listed. Whenever I choose one of them, the price appears, the new price appears in my text box. Okay, but the problem is, let's see, whenever I change something, it is not doing it for the current value, for the current changed value. So I guess whenever I click, it is still early. The value has not changed yet. So I need to use a different event. So I'm going to right click on my P-form, go into edit, double click on the list box. So for this mouse button pressed, I'm going to click on these three dots and I'm going to remove this event. Remove this macro. Actually, then I need to choose changed, I guess, or it can be after updating, because whenever we choose something it updates, I guess, but it can be changed as well. So let me try first after updating. After updating, let's run the macro called choose plist. Let's close these ones, save, and go into main form, go to product page, choose one item. It is not doing, okay, then update is something else for that part. Let me go into edit of P-form again. I'm going to double click on the list box. I'm going to remove this macro from here. Then I guess it can be the one called changed. So these events, so they do not give lots of information, but I guess it should be the changed one. Let me try it with this as well. We want to choose plist. Let's save and close. Go into main form or go to product page. Whenever I choose, okay. So the thing that we first thought was the correct one, the changed one, is applying to whenever the currently selected item has changed. So whenever I choose something, for example shoes, maybe I would like to update them by 5, I can just change one of them and the shoes is updated now, and we see that it works. So I can return back to the main menu, choose some other option maybe in the future. But if I go to the product page, now I'm able to change the prices, and these prices, for example for TV, let me set it to 900 and update it. These are actually affecting my database. If I go to the tables, into the product table, I see that TV's price is actually updated. So these are changing our database. So in this form, we have some user interface, and in this user interface, the user can interact with the database in a simpler way. And in the backend, we are actually running some SQL queries, changing the values, etc. So this is it for this part. And in the next part, we are going to have additional examples. Actually, with these subset of functions, we can have lots of different functionality. And we gave just one example, but in that example, we are actually selecting results from our tables. We show these results to the user, and the user can give some parameters, and with those parameters we can use update queries. We can also include some insertion, deletion, etc. So we are going to give more examples of these in the next video.